Hi, everyone. This is Gary Berman, host of the Cyber Hero Adventures Show. Today, we have a real special treat, something that hits close to home. Our audience knows a little bit about my story regarding insider threats. And we have one of the world's leading experts on that topic who's going to join us. And let's welcome Roger Black to the show. Hey, Roger. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invite, Gary. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and so our audience, I'm sure, is well aware of the amazing work that's done at the U.S. CERT over at Carnegie Mellon University. And before I hit the record button, I was explaining how I had the privilege of getting to meet General Greg Toohill, many years ago. It happened to be over comics, and then we kind of connected on the topic of cybersecurity. And when I started thinking about who would be, great to talk about insider threats, there was no second choice. It's you and your team. So really happy that you're here.
Thanks. Yeah, we're doing a lot of great work at CERT, under General Toohill. A lot of different avenues, insider threat being, just one of them. But it is where a lot of the research around insider threat has started, and we continue to grow it with some great research that we're, currently spinning out to make the field even, more valuable.
Yeah. And so how did you get there?
Well, this all started in the early 2000s when the Secret Service, approached us. CMU is an FFRDC, federally funded research and development center. So I think there are roughly almost 46 FFRDCs across the country, a lot of them associated with institutes of higher learning such as CMU, UC Berkeley, MIT, Stanford. So we're just one of several that the government, contracts out. We're basically an advisor, a trusted advisor to the government. And so as such, the Secret Service came to us in 2000 and brought us about 150 cases and wanted to delve into them with some of their behavioral scientists and just learning about insider threats. These were 150 cases, and they wanted to figure out why these people were doing it, how they did it, and so that's how this all started. We took those 150 cases, built some preliminary modeling around that, and since then we've continued to add to that case corpus. Roughly now we're at about 1,500 adjudicated cases, with about another 1,500 in the queue to go into this database of insider threats.
I mean, that's the first time I've heard of an empirically sound database about the topic of insider threats. And why it came to my mind is I've seen some of your research, and one of the things that was really just amazing to me is that you had an empirical basis. It was quantitative, and it was, statistically sound. And you recently mentioned that you're now starting to incorporate AI to try to get through the sort of this backlog of adjudicated cases. There are a few things I want to ask you about that. So first, let's talk about adjudicated cases, and maybe you can share with our audience the process, that you go through so that what you're representing is, based in fact.
Sure. I mean, we're getting the dockets, all the documentation from the court system as the case has been, completely settled and a judgment has been rendered. So we get that documentation, and previously it was just going through the document itself, hand coding all the details about it. And so, as you mentioned, now we're starting to introduce AI to help us along, training the models to read those dockets, to read the exact all the nitty gritty details that we need to be able to code the cases correctly and with all the value you can get from it, with all the details.
Indeed. And so you were kind of to provide a couple of frameworks, a couple of slides, defining what exactly, is an insider threat. So why don't you take us through what we're looking at here?
Sure. So CERT, we have a definition of insider threat that might be different than some of the other definitions you see out there. they're all in the same family. But for us, the definition of an insider threat is the potential for an individual who, and if you can sort of see, the arrows, they have some additional wording. It's the potential for an individual who has or had authorized access to an organization's critical asset to use that access either maliciously or unintentionally. That's one of the differentiators in our definition. In a way that can negatively impact the organization.
So this, forgive the interruption, just on that very important point, are you referring to don't click on that link, for example? Yes. Okay.
Phishing is a prime example of that unintentional insider, deleting, critical materials, etc. Or if you're in the software field, think about a code repository where you might accidentally commit some code, and then it brings the entire, application down. So unintentional is again one of those differentiators for us in our definition.
Like the CrowdStrike.
Yeah. Assuming it was unintentional. Yeah, absolutely. Which I'm not saying any different, but it definitely is what I'm talking about with an unintentional. They had all the best intentions, and it just didn't go as planned. So if we break those components down, starting with the potential for an individual. So what do we mean by an individual? A current or former employee. Obviously current employee is a no-brainer, but what about that former employer? Well, did they have their access shut off? Do they still have an account that wasn't disabled? Those type of things happen all the time.
Yeah.
Where an employee has left and their account is still active, their methods of getting into the network are still available. Full-time employees, part-time employees, that's obviously under that subset. Temporary employees that are brought on. The bottom two are big ones in my opinion, because contractors and trusted business partners. We've changed that terminology a little bit to trusted external entities. I'm not sure the reasoning, but that seems to be the label du jour. For trusted business partners, trusted.
So would supply chain vulnerabilities fit right there?
Yeah. Anyone who again, if they have access, think Target and an HVAC company.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. That's one of the best examples. That HVAC company had access to Target. Someone hacked into the HVAC company, got access to Target, and the customer information was readily available. So again,
within these individuals, just staying in the first column for a moment, are you seeing trends going up or down in any one of them?
I think one of the problems not the right word, but one of the issues with insider threat is we're seeing more of it being reported. So the contractors and trusted business partners wasn't always at the forefront, so now as we're seeing, we're getting the exposure out there of what we do, as far as insider threat, and we're saying, hey, to pay attention. We're seeing that sort of rise where, hey, we're making sure that our contractor, our vendors, that they're on board, that they are doing, we're treating them as we do our own employees, and we're vetting them as carefully as we are. As far as trends of insider incidents, I'd really have to go back and look at some of our data to see if there's anything trending up or down.
Okay, so what's exposed? The assets here.
Well, the assets could be people. It could be information. That IP, intellectual property theft. It could be a specific technology, which kind of goes hand in hand. And facilities. You could have a factory that is your critical asset. And that's one of the things that we really hammer home when we're talking about when organizations are trying to get their head around an insider threat, and what that could mean to them. one of the first steps we'd like to do is, okay, what are you trying to protect? What are your critical assets?
Right.
What are the processes behind making widgets? Widgets are a critical asset. Okay, but what about the processes and services that can be disrupted, that cause a disruption to that, to you creating the widget? So it could be any one of these. We have plenty. One of the things that we do is we go out and do evaluations, program evaluations, vulnerability assessments for insider threat. And, when we talk about assets, a lot of times people say our people, our employee safety is by far our most critical asset.
Right.
They have a product. They're on market. They have they have a reputation, but they've decided, no, our people first, and then they sort of develop their program around protecting their people first.
Yeah, that's interesting. We have a lot of really great stuff to continue on, but let's focus for a moment on some of the negative impacts. Before we hit the record button, I was mentioning to you that I originally, a while ago, came across a matrix that you created at Carnegie Mellon about the impacts of insider threats. And if memory serves me, there were maybe 15 or so columns, and they were divided into buckets like financial impact, emotional impact, psychological impact, reputational damage, actual physical damage, and all those things. Yeah. So maybe you can amplify some of that about some of the negative impacts on insider threats.
Well, for a lot of companies, reputation is a big one. And again, one of the issues we have with insider threat is that a lot of it goes unreported because they don't want that reputational.
That's right.
They had an incident internally, and so it doesn't get reported or it gets settled. So again, going back to our corpus, we don't necessarily see that it got settled out of court.
Just completely speculative here. If you had to estimate, what percentage of insider threat cases are not reported? Just realizing there's no basis for that, but just what is your knee jerk?
Significantly more than we have. I would say if I had to put maybe 70%.
Wow.
Maybe higher. It's significant or unreported. I could get back to you with what we think is the exact stat, because that would be more of a darker science there, and more speculative.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, if you don't mind, because also the other thing about this is now the sort of the patchwork of local, state, federal, global regulatory regimes, are now having consequences. Yeah. That really can affect people, including jail time and things like that. So, and now they have, if you want to do business with the Department of Defense, 300,000 small businesses, have to be in compliance with their requirements and things like that.
And the other thing that complicates that, Gary, is when you throw the unintentional in there as well. Only about a third of insider events are malicious. The other 2/3 are unintentional.
Oh,
so
okay.
now you're talking, you're even, the aperture is widening even further. Is that phishing? You clicked on the phishing link. Is that reported? Probably not. So again, a little bit of a dark science in trying to figure out exactly, the amount of what you're looking for is a total and what's.
So let's go to the next slide here, because this is really, really interesting, and it kind of begins to answer the question. So what is an organization, supposed to do or not, when it comes to this risk?
Yeah. So, this is something we teach in our Insider Threat Program Manager Implementation and Operations class. We go through, what it takes to, start a program, get it running, and get it up and running successfully. This slide is basically what you have to have, or not have to, what you should have, with regards to, having an successful program. Again, it's our key components. Off the top of the bat, if you have a risk management department, if there is any type of risk management procedures, try and integrate with that, because this is, it's insider risk. We're getting away from the idea of insider threat and calling it insider risk, and you'll see it a lot of different names. But at CERT, we are definitely trying to migrate into insider risk. And so that's one of the key components. It provides synergies with people who know risk. They might not know your insider risk, so you're bringing a lot of valuable information to them to the table, and they know how to handle it. You have those critical assets; they already should be somewhat aware of the risks of those assets, and so you're just bringing, say, here's this insider component that you should consider. Along those same lines, that formalized and defined program. We see a lot of instances where a company will have an insider threat program, but it's not really an insider threat program. It is an individual, typically via force of personality, who has been tasked with being the insider threat person, and they can or cannot make things happen. Sometimes they can go about and navigate the corporate landscape and get a program up and running, but when they leave, that goes with them. So we say, make it a formalized program, have roles, not specific names. You have roles, you have governance, you have some of these other components that go in with that formalized program.
And so I love the idea of referring to it as risk, because it certainly is. So large enterprises, have the people, the time, the resources, the money to be able to implement something like this. How would you describe like a light version of this for, let's say, a small to medium business, that has, the IT person also gets the coffee? I mean,
it's still a derivation on a theme, because you still want policies, you still want to formalize, what you're doing. It doesn't have to be, all these different silos of HR and finance. You still want to have policies. You still want to, show where you have the authority to do the things you need to do. One of the things we need to do in an insider threat program is collect data from different data sources, from different data owners. Think HR, think IT. Okay, do I have the authority to do that? And again, it could just be a simple policy. Most organizations, even at a smaller level, will have policies.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the word authority, because recently I came across, I think it was a ruling or something like that, that in the United States, a company has the legal authority to monitor all communications of its employees, even if it's not in an office.
Gary, we hammer this home so thoroughly in our classes. Involve legal every step of the way. If you have a nascent program, if you're thinking about a program, even if you're daydreaming about having a program, call legal and tell them you're having a daydream about implementing a program.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we want them involved. We want to know where the guide rails are. Some insider threat programs, they already have the reputation, that big brother reputation.
That's right.
You want to avoid that.
Yeah.
So the way to avoid that is transparency, having legal involved, having everyone that in the company know that what you're doing is on the up and up. There's no shenanigans. I only look at data that I need to look at. So as far as there could be a company, a private company versus a public company. There could be different ramifications, and it could be per company. I can't really speak to some of the legal, decisions around privacy. But we spend a lot of time saying, if you have a privacy, you have a legal department, get them in, get them a seat at the table as early as possible.
One of the things that you mentioned metaphorically is like Big Brother. I think my instinct is a lot of people think that or feel that. But one of the things I liked about your program that we saw on the previous slide is positive incentives.
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that I've always worked on is sort of trying to pivot the industry from fear, uncertainty, and doubt to fun, from FUD to fun,
Yeah.
is a way of kind of addressing what you're talking about.
Sure. And I mentioned, some of the research that we're doing in positive incentives over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years is one of the big ones. And when we mean positive incentives, I always have the caveat when I'm teaching, it's not, oh, everything is hunky dory. We're talking about balance. You're still going to have violations, and there might be some, type of penalties, but we want some type of balance there. We don't want everything, to be negative.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
As far as wrist slapping or things of that nature. And the research bears it out. Positive incentives work. Again, one of the things the insider threat programs do, especially the larger ones, is they have behavioral scientists to help out.
Right.
You go to some of the 100,000 employee companies. If they have programs, a lot of times they have a part-time, full-time behavioral scientist that thinks about these things and advises on the organization.
Well, and also, I mean, like heuristics, there's a lot you can tell by what people do or don't do. And that's actually an interesting insider threat, but a larger sort of question too is, monitoring people working anywhere, and
Yeah.
now with AI, you can have a real Gary Berman, a fake Gary Berman talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the behavioral aspect is one of the things that drew me in. My career up until I joined the SCI and CERT was infrastructure. It was the nuts and bolts. It was networking, storage, virtualization, Windows. That's where I cut my teeth. And then I had the opportunity to join this team. And I'm like, wait, there's a lot of interesting things coming out of here.
Yeah.
With insider threat. And, if I could take just another moment, another up and coming research, subject is the idea of how leadership in organizations impacts the organization and insider risk, insider threat.
For sure.
The idea of toxic leadership. How, again, some really fascinating research coming out of Pittsburgh here.
Well, in our case, it was my wife and I had started our company, market research company. It was going great for 10 years. We were very fortunate to be able to sell 49% of it to the largest marketing company in the world. And we were just a little rounding error, so we were taking the dust from their shoes with incredible gratitude. It was going great. And then, one day I got a call from my biggest client, and she said, "What the F is going on in your data collection facility?" And I almost dropped the phone. And he said, because that she had gotten a call from one of my employees that there was rampant fraud going on in our call center, and that we were under investigation by the FBI, and they should cease communications with me. I got 3 such calls from 3 different big clients. And it's a long story, but it turns out it was insiders who were doing social engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
You tell that story, and I immediately think of, okay, prevent, detect, respond. And the idea of insider threat, where, if you're familiar with the timeline, there's a left to right, prevent, detect, respond type of graphic I have in mind. What could have possibly happened to, prevent, or how, or were there any behavioral characteristics that, you might have led you to say, hey, something, this person.
Yes, that's an incredibly astute analysis, because we actually caught one of the alleged perpetrators with a hard drive removing data from our CPU that we're using.
Yeah.
We had instituted a non-compete agreement because could tell some things were off,
Mhm.
and everybody in the company except these 5 people signed it. We went to our attorney and all kinds of things. So there were retrospectively, warning signs, but not at the time. And the 2 of them were upset about not being treated the way they wanted to as a result of the acquisition.
Yeah. And so, we talk a lot about, what does that whole person bring into the organization? They have predispositions, just personality predispositions. They
Yeah.
have stressors. I have 3 children, 2 of which are in college, and 1 is 2 years away from college. Stressors. There's
Right.
tuition bills coming at the end of the semester. I'm 2 weeks free, and then I get a couple more tuition bills. And understanding those things. And again, if you can build that whole person picture of these individuals, you get a better idea of what normal is and what abnormal is.
Right.
And Joe came in for the last 15 years within 5 minutes of 9 o'clock, and left at 4:30. Over the last 6 months, Joe has come in 7 times at 11 o'clock at night, and printed
Right.
25 pages each night. Okay, maybe we take some time and you don't call the cops, but you say, okay, maybe this is something that is piquing interest. We take Joe and put him over here, and do a little, maybe monitor a little more closely.
So you came up with these, not you, but Carnegie came up with these behavioral characteristics, and is there any data yet on? I guess you can't prove a negative, like, is risk mitigation working? Well, we haven't had an insider threat, so it's working.
That's the catch-22, if you will, with insider threat. And when we talk about it in our class, it's measurements of effectiveness. We have another class called Insider Risk Measurements of Effectiveness. What do you do when you're successful? Especially when you're starting to prevent, you're starting to do what it could be referrals, and say, hey, we referred this person to HR, and we got them the help we need. Because in the end, we look at it as the employee being a valuable resource. You've brought them on, you've done the onboarding in a space such as ours. You're giving them clearance. You're paying for that clearance. You're doing all these things, and you're investing in them. Is it in your best interest to just cut them off because of
Right.
So it again, the phrase "turn them around, don't turn them in." I think is the phrase.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how we want to, that's how we want to portray the insider threat programs. We're here to help the organization, and let everyone know that. If we have an event such as yours, that 100 people just lost their job, so it's in your best interest. If it's not spying on your coworker, but if you sense that someone is having an issue, or you see that you have a good idea how much they make, and they just bought a $500,000 Bentley, and they're pulling into the parking lot. There might be some signs there that warrant saying, I sense something's not right. I know normal with my coworker, and something's not normal. Again, helping them. We want to position this as helping the employee, and by helping the employee, we're helping the company.
So, do you provide this as a service to an employee? Let's say a big enterprise watching the show. Do they engage you? How does that work? Do you do that? As a university?
What we do is we have courses that we for insider threat programs. We have the Insider Threat Program Management Implementation and Operations Manager. That's for just the audience is pretty broad for all these, but that is the higher level. We're starting a program, or I'm already an Insider Threat Program Manager. I need to know more about how to make this successful. We have that course. We also have an Insider Threat Vulnerability Assessment. That one is a little more deeper in the weeds technically. It's meant for maybe the analysts that work for an insider threat program. Think of an insider threat program where you have analysts that are looking over the data that's coming in, from various parts of the organization. They're sort of taking the puzzle pieces, if you will, and trying, and seeing if there are any type of, nefarious behaviors.
Well, so your output or product or service, is courses, but you would not be like a consultant to go into a enterprise and they would, hire you to help build a program. That's not your model.
Typically not. We will do those assessments, and those give you some solid foundations on how to build a program. We've recently done one where we did a program evaluation. They didn't have a program, but we still did a program evaluation. Turns out they had a lot of the pieces already in place.
Yeah.
And we just said, all you need to do is do this, and you got yourself a program. And so there was real value in that, because they were just sort of, they really didn't know what they had. And,
well, I think also, from a sort of a fiduciary responsibility, if an organization is in court, it shows that they're exercising, in legal terms, what's referred to as reasonable care.
Yes.
And that sure sounds good. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, so would you like our audience to learn more about the courses, and then can they enroll in the courses like online, or are they all in person, or what is the state of that?
We have online and in-person courses. They're on if you do a search for SCI Insider Threat courses, it comes up. We have 3 of them. We do the vulnerability assessment, the program management, implementation and operations, and the more advanced is, once you have a program up, measures effectiveness. One of the products, Gary, if I could, is our common sense guide. And a lot of your audience might be watching this and saying, well, I don't even know where to start. I have no idea.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
We have our common sense guide, free download. There's no fill out. There's no paywall. There's nothing like that.
What is the website? And we'll make sure to annotate it here.
Let me grab it real quick, because, we have this additional slide for the best practices.
Oh, yeah. We can do that. Hold on.
Yeah.
So we'll go back. Wait, do you mean this slide? Or no, sorry.
The best practices for internal risk mitigation.
Oh, sorry. There.
These are.
It's on the bottom of that.
Oops, sorry, I lost you here. Yeah. So that's our white paper, but I can add a link if that would work.
Yeah, let's do it just to make it easier for our audience.
We're on our 7th edition of this,
Wow.
And this is a extraordinarily valuable asset, and I'm not just saying that.
No, I believe you for sure.
It gives you case studies. It goes through each of these. Knowing and protecting your critical assets, developing it goes through each of these step by step. Gives you case studies. Maps to standards that the government uses, like National Insider Threat Task Force standards. So like you were saying, when you want to prove your value and say, hey, listen, we're doing everything according to NITF standards. We're doing everything according to NIST standards. We have, we list different standards for each of these, elements. Mitigating unauthorized data exfiltration. Here's how you do it. We also tell you if it's more pertinent for a large organization or a small organization, because some of these are for very large organizations.
Right, exactly.
Extraordinarily valuable asset. It blows my mind that we give it away for free.
Well, you're a research institution. So let me put this up here. So these are different ways to get more information about the different products and services that you offer.
One of the ones I'd like to highlight while we have this is this tool landscape. A lot of organizations, I want an insider threat program. One of their knee-jerk reactions to go buy a tool. And what we did is say, put your brakes on. You might not have to buy that, and those tools are expensive. You might not have to buy a tool. You already might have everything you need. A little bit of, if you don't have scripting, or if you don't have, you go out and you find someone that can help you there, but that will be a lot cheaper than buying the tools. So it's that low cost tech. It's in the right, upper right, low cost technical solutions to start an insider threat program. Start with what you have before you go buy a tool.
I mean, that's such a profound insight, because, one of the things that I've listened and learned a lot about over the years is, because of the sort of relatively short time frame that a CISO, for example, is in place, they buy all these solutions in their their stack, and then they leave, and like the next one comes in, don't even know what they have, let alone interoperability and things like that.
Well, and we talk a lot in our classes. Is the tool going to do what you need it to do? And so, one of the things we recommend is this use case type of methodology, where you have your use case of your critical assets and the threats to them. You need to find out what you need to detect to prevent, to protect that asset. Once you find that out, then you can go to that tool vendor and say, okay, can you do this? Here are the results I'm looking for, because you don't want to buy that tool. That's a big black eye to the CIO, for you. Right. When you go and say, hey, we spent $100,000, it doesn't really do what I needed to do, but and the salesperson,
well, that's another whole discussion. It's like they're speaking different languages. The sales and marketing people and the technical people, like from two completely different universes, Yeah. I remember, for example, zero trust architecture. I interviewed like the guy who wrote the paper about that like 3 or 4 times over the years, and everyone's saying zero trust. Now everyone's saying AI, not even knowing what that means,
and a lot of times AI is a complicated, fancy Excel spreadsheet. That's basically what some versions of AI boil down to. There's a lot of marketing going on. As an FFRDC, we don't recommend vendors or anything like that, but we do recommend really doing your homework, making sure a tool does what you want. And again, you already might have the capability to do what you need to do natively, already. So just don't jump and buy a tool just because someone tells you should.
Yeah, 10-4 on that. So Roger, I neglected to mention your title. Do you have a job title?
I'm a systems engineer. It's at the SCI. Like we're under the Carnegie Mellon umbrella. Again, I've been in the IT industry. The decades have flown by, but I spent about 20 years just in the infrastructure space, and then again I came over to the SCI. I have a little bit of a teaching background. It was a grad school thing that I didn't follow up on, but so I teach these classes that I've been mentioning. I go out and do evaluations for government and industry that I've mentioned. I thoroughly enjoy this space. Because I can have conversations like this, it's a human problem. It's more of a human problem, but there's an IT aspect of it too. It brings a lot of my interests together, and I think a lot of people feel the same way that are in this. Insider threat is a very interesting field to be in, especially now.
Yeah, well, you certainly have my attention, and I'm going to see about maybe enrolling in one of your courses. Do you charge for those? Or
they aren't cheap, but they are well worth it.
I'm sure
everyone comes away just blown away by just the what they've learned, and just again, for those same reasons I just said. It's just such an interesting field when you start bringing that behavioral aspect to it and understanding those things. And we talk about the modeling. We haven't even talked about modeling yet. The modeling for fraud and sabotage and those different insider threat types. The modeling's fascinating. You can track a progression of behaviors, and up until the incident. And it,
Well, you realize you just invited yourself back on my show, right?
I can get you the modeling expert. I would be, I would not be the person to go in depth in modeling.
But that'd be fun. I'll tell you one thing. I'm sure I've learned a lot today, and on behalf of a grateful digital universe, Roger Black, thanks for who you are and for what you do, and most importantly, why you do it.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate the time to expound on this field a little bit.
Okay, and to our audience, stay tuned for more from the Cyber Hero Adventures show.